Young girl drinks a magic potion. The next second, it fell from the ceiling. She hit a boy on the head. She was lying there motionless. Before the boy could react, the young girl leapt to her feet. She asked him like a madman what month and year it was. Then she fell back into a coma. When she woke up again, she was brought home by the boy. She looks at the calendar and realizes that she has traveled back in time to 1974. It was a very distressing experience for Lisa. She was 2 years late because she had got the date wrong. She explains to the boy that she is from the year 2010. Her mother is a physics scientist. But just yesterday, her mother had been in a car accident and might not live long. The mother's greatest wish was to see her first love again. Unfortunately, they hadn't spoken since they separated in 1972. So Lisa drank a travel potion made by her mother. She wanted to go back to 1972 to help her mother fulfill her wish. But somehow there was a mistake. The date came back to 1974. Seeing that Roy didn't believe her, Lisa had to take out her future phone to prove to him all the technology available in 2010. Roy is a fan of science fiction. Seeing that the phone could still take pictures, this convinced him that Lisa was from the future. Lisa took a picture of her mother with her first love, Mr. Jack. She went to the school where they attended, but the strange thing was, they were both in the same class at the same school. The students had never seen Jack before. Even their mother was unknown to them. They had no choice but to sneak into the office to see if they could find anything on the class roster. Lisa managed to find her mother's current address, but there was still no information about Jack, and so the trail was broken. Lisa had nowhere to go, and she didn't know what to do next, so she thought she'd stay at Roy's house for a few days. She'd find Jack and leave, but Roy didn't want to. It wasn't that Roy didn't want to help Lisa. He simply felt that the conditions at home were too bad. He was afraid that Lisa would suffer if she stayed with him, but he had no choice but to take her home. Roy asked Lisa, would he be a good director in the future? His lifelong dream was to make a science fiction film. Lisa said, I don't know. I never watch films. The two of them spent the night huddled in this little house, worried that Lisa might catch a chill. Roy gave her the only heater to sleep on. He covered himself with a thin blanket. They stayed cold all night. The next day, they went to Lisa's mother's current address. They tried to ask their mother where Jack was, but after ringing the doorbell for days, no one answered, and that's when Lisa's uncle happened to be passing by, so Lisa called out to him. Lisa lied that she was her mother's junior high school friend. She had just returned home today and wanted to meet her mother. This is how she found out about her mother's whereabouts from her uncle. It turned out that she had changed schools 2 years ago and had moved. She doesn't live in the old house anymore. Uncle Lisa was a kind-hearted man. He gave Lisa her mother's current address. He told her to contact him if she needed anything. Lisa was happy to finally have a new lead. She kept telling Roy how nice her uncle was. Her parents had divorced when she was very young. She had no memory of her father. It was her uncle who had always looked after her mother and herself. She was about to collapse the day her mother died. It was her uncle who reassured her that everyone in their family had good luck. 36 years ago my uncle was going to take a bus back home, but on that day, he forgot to bring his ticket. The bus was involved in an accident that night and fell off a cliff. All 38 passengers on the bus died. My uncle missed the bus and was able to save his life. So my mother's luck wasn't too bad. This time, she would survive the crisis. That's how Lisa found the courage to travel back 36 years to thank Roy for taking her in. Lisa took on the role of his assistant to help him with this science fiction film. The conditions here were basic, but they both worked very hard. Each shot was shot several times. Roy carefully edited it on film. These days together, they got to know each other better, and Lisa gradually realized Roy may look unkempt, but he was actually a very careful man. They went to the bathhouse together. Lisa was slow in washing. Roy waited at the door on winter nights, even when he was freezing. He didn't say a word of complaint. That's how he always was. He helped Lisa in silence, but never wanted to give anything back. After much searching, Lisa finally found her mother when she was young. She took the photo and called her mother over. When she saw the photo, she said she didn't know Jack. She didn't remember taking this picture with him. Lisa was totally confused. They had been in love in 1972. It was 1974, and there was no way she hadn't seen Jack before, so she asked her mother to think about it again. But to her surprise, Lisa's mother suddenly felt dizzy. She was clearly not feeling well. Lisa had no choice but to leave for a while. On the way back, Roy suddenly said that maybe there was no such thing as Jack. Lisa's mother might be experiencing something strange. Two of them didn't know where to go for a while. Roy was going to see a friend to talk about the script for a new film. The other guy was a photographer. He was unkempt. Lisa didn't like him, so he found an excuse to go to the next room for a while. But instead she accidentally found the photographer had taken a picture of her mother. Out of curiosity, Lisa approached her mother the next day with the photo. To her surprise, her mother said she had a good relationship with the photographer. She often modeled for him, and that his real name was Tom. Lisa was stunned because her real father's name was Tom. Roy's photographer friend was her father. Lisa couldn't accept it for a moment. She hated unkempt men. No wonder her mother had finally divorced him. But now it was a dilemma. If she had stopped her mother from being with him, she would never have been born. And now she can't find Jack. This is all very stressful for her. Coming out of the restaurant, it was raining heavily outside. At a loss for what to do, Lisa suddenly found Roy was waiting for her at the door with his umbrella. Lisa's heart was warm. All her life, Apart from her uncle, Roy was the only man who had ever been so kind to her. In the days that followed, she grew fond of him, but she didn't dare to say anything. Nor could she. After all, she was from the future. It's not possible between them. To help Lisa find Jack, Roy gave up all his savings, then took her to the local newspaper, praying that the director would run a missing persons notice. He was always so uncommunicative. He was not doing well for himself, but he was always thinking of Lisa. Lisa could see it in her eyes, but she didn't know what she could do to help Roy. The only thing she knew was that Roy loved films, so she did everything she could to help him with his films. Get on so well these days, and the news came from the newspaper. The missing person notice was successfully published. Lisa had done everything she could. If she still couldn't find Jack, she had no choice but to go back to the future. This made Roy feel a little sad, but he didn't dare to confess directly. Lisa saw what he was thinking, so she wanted Roy to be open-minded. Lisa said, "You'd be a very famous photographer one day, marry a beautiful actress, and have very lovely children." For Roy, at that time, I had become a man of the past, because I was from the future. Lisa's words made Roy feel very sad. He suddenly walked out of the house. Then he ran and ran and ran, panting. He went to a friend's house to borrow a camera. He wanted to add a shot to the end of that film, and he wanted to shoot it himself. The next day, Roy took Lisa to a cherry blossom grove. It was winter and there were no cherry blossoms, but he insisted on filming here. Lisa went along with him as usual. A back shot was taken here. The scene shows Lisa walking further and further away. Somehow there is a touch of sadness in the parting. When the shoot was over, Roy said to Lisa, somewhat embarrassed, he hoped that in 2010, to see the cherry blossoms with her. By then, he would be almost 60 years old, and Lisa would still be so young when she returned to the future. It was sad to think about it. Lisa promised him, "I'd come back here to see him again in the future." But then she remembered the words, "I was born before you were born, and you have grown old since I was born." After returning home, Roy suddenly received a phone call from his hometown. His father was seriously ill and asked him to come home. This made Roy very sad. It wasn't just because of his father's health. He told Lisa his father had had an accidental stroke and was paralyzed in bed. He would need his own care for the rest of his life, so this time he might not be coming back. His dream of making movies would have to end here, and he couldn't help Lisa find Jack anymore. That night, Roy stayed up late to finish editing the film. He wanted to give it to Lisa as a gift. At least they would have something to think about back in the future. Lisa didn't want Roy to go home, but she had done everything she could. She couldn't find Jack, so she had to go back to the future to look after her mother. She was just about to remix the Back to the Future potion, but the glass fell over the side. Lisa realized the glass was still in the air. Just then, a middle-aged man suddenly walked in. Lisa recognized him immediately. He was Mr. Jack, her mother's first love, only he seemed to be in his 50s. Jack explained. He was also a scientist. He had traveled back in time 38 years ago to do historical research in 1972. That's when he met his mother. They fell in love and spent 2 happy years together. But it was then that he realized his actions here were gradually changing history. The consequences of a time warp are unthinkable. There was no choice. He had to erase everyone's memories of himself and Lisa's mother, of course. So when Lisa went to the school with the picture, mother would say she hadn't seen Jack, but decades later her mother inadvertently saw that photo again. Memories of Jack instantly flooded her mind. The side effects made her dizzy and unable to see the road, which indirectly led to her mother's car accident. Jack explained, to make sure he hadn't made an impact by crossing back. Every now and then, he would check for information about himself. He suddenly found the ad that Lisa had posted looking for someone. That's why he started the investigation. He understood what had happened, but history could never be altered, even though he still loved Lisa's mother. But he couldn't be with her. Jack made a promise to Lisa that he would see her mother. But in the end, his memory would be erased. Now that Lisa had fulfilled her mother's wish, so he's going to erase her memories of this time too, and then send her back to 2010. Lisa said, "Please wait, I must see someone one last time. After I see him, I'll go back to the future." Unaware that Roy had packed his bags, and then he found Lisa. He gave her the tape of the film. He told Lisa he was going back home on the bus tonight. Lisa was afraid to tell him that she was going back to the future. The thought that all memories of Roy would be erased. Tears were falling as well. The more Lisa thought about it, the sadder she became. Finally she rushed out. She hugged Roy tightly. She didn't want to forget Roy. She didn't want to lose Roy. She just hated that she had met the love of her life at the wrong time. Roy just stroked her head in a doting way, and finally he left. Lisa walked the streets in a daze. She met her uncle halfway. He was in a panic and said he had to take the bus home tonight, but he had forgotten his ticket. If he didn't go back for it, he would miss the bus. Lisa suddenly realized that the bus Roy was about to take was the same bus that Uncle had missed and ended up falling off a cliff. So she rushed out after him. She had to stop this. She couldn't accept that Roy would die because of this. It was hard to get to the station, but she found that Roy had already boarded the bus. So Lisa rushed through the crowd shouting, and that's when Jack yanked Lisa right back and warned her that travelers can't change the past, or they might never return to the future. To her surprise, Lisa pulled out her travel potion. Lisa said, "I'm staying here." Lisa went after her once more. She banged on the bus as hard as she could, shouting Roy's name at the top of her lungs, praying that he wouldn't leave, praying that he wouldn't die. But the bus didn't stop. The bus went further and further away. She watched Roy leave, watching her lover run to his death.
Think I'm losing my mind now, it's in my head. Darling, I hope that you'll be here when I need you.
Lisa was devastated. She kept saying she was sorry. Jack tried to ease Lisa's pain. Jack also erased her memory at this time. About 1974. About everything that happened here. About her favorite guy, Roy. These memories began to fade in and out of her mind. Eventually, it became a blur. Lisa still forgot, forgetting the man who cared for her most. And when she woke up again, she had been sent back to 2010 by Jack. Now in her memory, her mother is still in hospital after a car accident. It's the 3rd of March. A selection of news was broadcast on television. 36 years ago today, a bus heading for home fell off a cliff. All 38 passengers were killed. In their memory, the public is invited to observe 3 minutes of silence. Jack kept his promise to Lisa. He came to the hospital, using future technology to bring Lisa's mother back to life. Jack still had his memories erased. Lisa crossed his path, but now she doesn't even remember who Jack is. She has forgotten everything. Lisa is overjoyed to see her mother awake, but just then, she happened to find the tape in her pocket, and it made her curious. She wondered where it had come from, so she went to a friend in the film club, borrowed an old projector. She wanted to see what was written down on the tape. The film uses simple props. The film was a science fiction love story. Lisa just thought it looked familiar, but she couldn't remember where she'd seen it before. Until the end of the film, she saw a familiar figure. The more she looked at it, the more she realized that it seemed like herself, and the director's name was Roy.
Think I'm losing my mind now, it's in my head. Darling, I hope that you'll be here when I need you.
A friend found a note in the box of the tape. Lisa opened it and saw. It read, "I want to see the future cherry trees with you." No one knows if Lisa thought of Roy, but every spring since then, she would come alone to the cherry grove, wandering and admiring, looking around as if she were here, waiting for someone.